Okay, I'd like to call the monthly meeting of the Bristol County Water Authority Board of Directors to order. It's October 24th, 2020, a little bit after 5 o'clock. Second item on the agenda is public input. Not seeing anybody from the general public, we'll move on to our pension report by Jen Turk from Nyhawk, which I guess is being done via Zoom?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So,
Let's see if she shows up. Let's make it cozy here.
how many copies of this are there?
That's what I'm trying. That's presentation, that's yeah, they're all set that way.
They should be, yeah, we check the email, they should have to.
I don't see it here yet.
Yeah, I'll check with them, see if she's having a problem.
I should be on the way now. Steve, we assume there is no waiting room. We're just waiting for that, literally.
Waiting for them.
Actually, I haven't seen that before. AI companion.
Who's this?
I've seen that before.
I don't know.
Don't click on it. The bottom, on the bottom, there's something called AI companion.
Oh.
So I used it a fair amount.
That's why I see it.
I tried using it once and I did not get it to do what I wanted to do. Which probably means I didn't have focus enough on it.
It did. Yeah. What is it, Central Falls?
Yeah. We're just the agents.
Central Falls. Yeah, that last.
Yeah.
That disappeared a long time ago.
The dispatcher, the agent.
She says she's joined. Yeah.
If you want to go to our next agenda item, while we're waiting for them to show up. It's minutes, which is something we can slip in. Oh, maybe they're here now.
Vice Chairman has just said, let's move on to the minutes. Move the minutes. So the first one on the agenda is for approval from the Finance Committee of September 25th, 2024.
We're almost dead.
Has everybody reviewed that? Is there a motion on the floor?
Make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of September 25th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None, any opposed? Hearing none, unanimous. The next is the minutes of the September 26th, 2024 board meeting.
I'm going to approve, but with a possible change.
Okay,
And the change is, I'm looking at the record of the Finance Committee board vote. This is on the bottom of page 1. And this is with respect to the claim we were considering the language in the second sentence of that paragraph at the bottom of the page. The crew made the repair, and once the water was turned back on, sediment made its way into the line. I'm thinking sediment made its way into certain fixtures. That's my understanding. I think, Chris, you brought that up. That's factually what happened. Whether it came from our system or their hot water tank, we don't know. But if we say factually certain fixtures, then that reflects exactly what we heard from the applicant.
okay.
What page is that again?
Instead of the line in the third line at the bottom paragraph on
Which page?
Page 1. But instead of the two words, the line, certain fixtures.
Okay. Okay, so with that amendment, any other discussion? All those, do we have a motion? Yes, we have
Yes,
a
I
motion.
motion.
And Do we, all those in favor of approving the minutes with that correction? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed? Oh, my God. Okay. The final
You
minutes.
weren't here.
And the last minutes to be approved are the October 2nd meeting of the Properties Committee. Do I have a motion to approve those
So
minutes? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay,
You good?
we're good there.
Okay, well, the next idea are bigger ones in terms of, oh, okay, you got it.
So Jen?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Perfect.
Thanks for joining us. So this is kind of more like a conference call to you, but we can see you on our wall. But you can't see us.
Okay.
All right.
Do you want me to share my screen too, so you don't have to look at my big head the whole time?
Yes, I will give you permission just in a second here. So you're speaking with, we got our full board here, 9 members. Myself and Dan, finance manager here as well.
Good. Nice to meet y'all. Thought it sent you a request for me to share. I don't know if that went through.
You should be able to do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, here it comes up now. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, do you want me to just jump in and you guys can ask questions along the way, or is there anything else you wanted to cover before we get started?
I think we just go for it.
Okay, perfect. So this mainly covers the funding valuation results. We didn't add any Gatsby because that's usually more of an auditor interest. But if you guys want to talk any Gatsby, I have that report ready as well. So, but on the funding valuation, the biggest story for this year was the positive asset returns. It was over 12% return for the year. So that well exceeded your expected 7.5% that you've been using. There was one fairly sizable lump sum that got paid out in this prior fiscal year. So you had one active retire and take their, I think it was $450,000 or so in a lump sum. So everything kind of shrank because of that. Liabilities came in almost exactly as we would have expected. Looking at last year and just bringing it forward to what we would have expected, it was almost like a little surprising how close it was. The only difference was a real small decrease. The mortality tables get updated every year for those lump sums. So there's a really small decrease from that, but otherwise liabilities came in almost exactly as we expected. So the main story, the liabilities were right on, the assets were higher than expected, so that brought down your contribution recommendations, both the 7.5% and then the alternative contribution that we look at 6.5% instead of that 7.5%. So those came down pretty well. Kind of looking forward, a couple of things that we wanted to touch on was reviewing that interest rate assumption. And I have a couple slides with some comparisons on that. And then also the expected benefit payments coming up in the near future. There potentially could be some more big ones coming up, so we wanted to make sure you're aware of kind of timing to make sure you have enough liquidity to cover those. So kind of the inputs that go into it. The census obviously is a big one. You can see it's stayed fairly consistent. The retirees didn't change at all, so their benefits stayed the same. Same with the vested terms. There's just a handful of vested term who used to work there but haven't started their benefit yet. So there's 3 term vesteds that are kind of hanging on. And then actives, the one one person left, so there was a decrease in that count. But overall, real stable, kind of steady as we expected. So then the other big piece of our valuation is the assets. So on the left-hand side, you can see just a real quick overview of kind of the ins and outs during the year. So you went from about 3.7 million, you guys put in 160,000. There was those benefit payments, which about 200,000 or just over 200,000 is kind of the regular monthly annuities that are getting paid to the retirees. And then the rest of that was the $450,000 or so lump sum that was paid to that one participant. Positive return of over 400,000, which gives us 3.6 million as of the valuation date, as of July 1st. And you can see kind of some history that we show on the right-hand side there. As you can see, the rates of return really bounce around, obviously, from year over year. So there is, if you guys are worried about every time the market jumps up and down, your contribution is going to jump up and down. So there is one thing we could look at with the assets to bring in a smoothing method. It's pretty common in pension plans, especially in Rhode Island, where we basically, instead of recognizing that full big gain or the full big loss all at once, they'll smooth that out and kind of recognize it over a period of time, usually either 3 years or 5 years. So if you're worried about contribution volatility, that would be something we can look at. And I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but if you do use a smooth value, you'll see the rates of return on that smooth value will just kind of flatten out those peaks and valleys. So overall, you expect to get in the same spot. It's just kind of getting there in a more consistent way instead of having those big swings. So if that's ever something you wanted to look at, we could definitely implement that. So here's the results last year versus this year. You can see the positive funding percentage increase went from 88 to about 94%. And then those contributions, both the recommended, which is at the 7.5%, and then that alternative, which it looks like you guys have probably, at least in recent history, have been funding more towards that alternative contribution. It came in at about 153,000 last year, and you guys put in 160. And then this year that went down to only 117,000. So again, that was both of those kind of key metrics were driven by positive asset returns in this prior year. And then one thing I did want to bring up, so right now kind of for your baseline, kind of the expected return on assets that we use for an interest rate, we're using 7.5% for the kind of the recommended contribution, and as well as the GASB report that I mentioned that the auditors and the accountants use to put numbers into your financial statements. That's currently at 7.5% as well, which is getting to be a outlier for sure. I have some history, so I can maybe send you a report that kind of shows what we've seen plans kind of do. And over the last 10 or so years, we've really seen a shift downward on those interest rates. The most common, about half of the plans that are included in these surveys are at 7%. I know for my plans that I work on personally, that's definitely the most common rate of return that people are using. So that's why I showed that kind of middle column was the 7%. So I think it would probably be worthwhile considering changing that and lowering it to at least that 7. It won't change the long-term cost of the plan. It's going to be whatever you actually get from your assets. It's more just for making sure we're recognizing costs in appropriate time periods, so you're not, deferring contributions to future generations. It's kind of, you want to try and get it so the costs are spread fairly over the time period. So that 7%, another thing that a client just a couple weeks ago, another client of mine was at 6.25%, so just 6.25%, and they actually had a bond rating, like I think it was the S&P, the bond rating agency actually kind of pushed back on them and said, why are you using that rate? So don't like to be an outlier and, attract any attention if people are looking at your financial statements for, other reasons. So I would suggest we go down to 7, at least for that recommended contribution and the GASB report. And then we can still show that alternate contribution at that 6.5% that's coming up this year is 117. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on, if you're okay with that, or if you really want to continue using that 7.5%. I think we can still defend it, I think, just based on some of your historical returns, but it's getting to be a little bit of an outlier. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, or maybe this is something you've discussed in the past.
Anybody?
All my clients use 7%.
Okay. It seems like 7%, what you're recommending, I think is a good way to go, Jen. Thanks.
Okay, and then we'll still keep that 6.5% for the alternative, just so you guys can see that as well.
Yep.
That's what we fund at. We fund it to 6.5.
Yeah, it seems like it. At least the last 5 years or so that I looked at, it looked like you're closer to that 6.5% alternative contribution. And it's okay since we've already issued the reports for this year, I'm fine leaving it at 7.5% this year, unless you want us to revise it. So it's kind of up to you guys. If you want, we can wait until next year, and I'll make a note to make that update next year. So it's kind of up to you depends on how far along the financial statements are, I suppose, with the GASB report would be the biggest thing.
We get started, so.
I think leaving it for 7.5 is fine for this year, and then we're just going forward. Yep.
Okay, perfect. I'll make a note for next year that we'll make that change. Okay. Okay. And then the other thing we wanted to show, since people are assumed to take a lump sum, we have some volatility from year to year. So kind of that baseline, just retiree payments, people who are current retirees getting an annuity, or a beneficiary or disabled participant, theirs is right around 200,000. So that's kind of the baseline. But then you can see some years we have real big spikes. So in particular, so this year we're not expecting any, and we haven't done any recent benefit calculations for someone who's looking to retire. So we kind of expect the current fiscal year will be kind of close to that 200,000, but then there's at least 2 people, maybe 3, I think it might have been 3 people, who are going to be hitting 65 here in the next, not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year. So there's the potential, if people do take their, age 65 retirement, that there could be some big spikes in some of the benefit payments coming up. So I don't think it's a concern or a problem, just to make sure that you have, enough liquidity so you don't have to sell low and buy high, however they state that. So the investment advisors would probably have some interest in this slide in particular. So yeah, we wanted to bring that to your guys' attention. But that's the biggest one in the near future, is those 2 people, then another 5-6 years again before we see more people hitting age 65. So just kind of something to be aware of, especially for the investments. And usually we have some lead time, just because we usually do a benefit calculation, pretty well ahead of when actually people take that lump sum. So usually you have at least, a few months of leeway where you'll find out, oh, this person is going to take a lump sum before the actual payments gets made. So, but yeah, we just wanted you guys to be aware. And it doesn't typically impact funding results very much to pay out those big lump sums, because you'll have the assets will decrease, then the liabilities will also decrease kind of at the same rate. So typically it doesn't have a big impact on like your funded percentage or your contribution as much. So just a interesting note we wanted to look at. Any questions on that?
Nope.
And this just gives a snapshot. So for this year, we'll leave it at that 7.5% interest rate. Everything else is pretty standard. We assume pay increases go up at 3% a year, which is a really common assumption. and it's a small enough group that it would be hard to tailor it a lot. Sometimes we'll have, people with lower service, maybe you're gonna get higher percentage increases. But with a group your size, it's kind of hard to do like a full-blown experience study. So I'm happy with the 3%. It's pretty common. And then again, the retirement rates, we assume everyone takes it at 65. So if you have people going out earlier or later, there could be some impact due to that. And then the last page is just our legalese, so we have to include for the actuary powers that be. Any questions on anything, or anyone have any questions you want to talk about?
Anybody? No? It seems like you've covered everything, Jen.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm glad. Good to be here. Hopefully you guys have a good evening.
I mean, it helps when you get good, positive, strong returns on the investments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like years after that rather than having to be the bearer of bad news all the time where we lost 15%, so your contributions go through the roof. So it's a good year for actuaries for sharing results.
Yep.
So.
Very good.
Well,
thank you.
All right. Thank you guys.
So long.
I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Juan, can I ask a couple other questions? Sure. It wasn't really at the actual, it was really a question for Dan first, and then kind of a question for the group. So, Dan, what is it, when you add up the administrative costs for this plan between these reports and the administrator and anything else, what's the ballpark that we spend administratively on these plans?
We paid them last year like just under $4,000. And then that's pretty much it. I mean, Washington Trust takes their chunk out of the investment itself. I think through September, actually, you see it on the report, it shows how much Washington Trust takes out. They take out a percentage of the value of the plan, but not a lot really.
And who's paying, is there someone handling the administration, paying the benefits payments and things like that?
I send them the information when somebody retires. I'll have like Donna pulls together the last 5 years, payroll, blah, 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 send that to them and they do the calculation. So the fee really has been less than $5,000 for the last 2 years. It's not like it charges a lot.
And the administrative side of how much does that end up what Washington takes out?
I don't know, I'd have to go back and look it through June. I mean, like I said, right now it's about six through September, that's about 5 months or so,
So it's small.
I'm sure it's a percentage, and again, depending on the value of the assets, they have a percentage, so not much negotiation power in there.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious, because I'm on another board where we have wound up the pension plan, just because it's an administrative burden and it's another management responsibility, and we've just gone to the participants and said, would you like an annuity, or would you like a lump sum? And it's easy if they want a lump sum. If it's an annuity, you can buy an insurance contract and just kind of take it all out and just make the thing go away forever so you don't have to do it. And this is pretty well funded that you really wouldn't have to probably come too far out of pocket. And what you do is you save the administrative costs over time, whatever. So I was just curious if we give it some thought for that.
It's good because this report, because I had no clue how many people were actually in the plan, other than I knew who was currently working. You know what I mean? And I knew Pam had taken an annuity just because Mark had said that. But this tells you there's 3 people that are not working anymore, but invested in the plan. They just haven't taken any money. And we have 8 people getting an annuity, and there's the 5 remaining active people. And like she said, it looks like there'll probably be a couple in the next, say, 4 years or so. They're getting close to that age. Unless we have an early one, we could have 3. And then the other 2 are pretty young.
Because investment returns have been really good, right? So our assets are pretty high. Interest rates have been, reasonably up compared to what they were. So it's kind of a good dynamic for plans to kind of be disposed of. So I mean, we will bear the risk of, if investments go down 20%, we bear that risk, right? So that's something to consider about winding up the plan because you're done. So anyway, food for thought.
Yeah. It has been talked about before by the board,
It's getting close.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Moving on. Executive Director's Report.
No, that's fine. Okay, report for October 24. We did receive our comments back from East Providence and their consultants on the 60% plans, and we forwarded them to our engineers, and in the process of reviewing them and incorporating their comments accordingly into the design documents. We're still, we did invoice East Providence.
If I can interrupt,
Yes.
any substantive comments?
Not significant, no. As reported last month, we did invoice them for a little over $300,000. I'm still waiting to receive, still haven't received payment back from them. And we started working on easements and access agreements. Now that the route has been finalized, those are going to be prepared so we can start engaging the private property owners when the pipeline route crosses over private property. With respect to the Pawtucket agreement, it was on the agenda for their October 8th meeting. Unfortunately, that item was tabled. I guess they did not have the latest draft from their attorney at the time of the meeting. Cindy Mack did reach out to their attorney, and they seem to be all set with the revised language, that being the attorney and their general manager. And I heard today that it's going to be rescheduled and put back on their board meeting for November 12th.
Steve, when we say revised language and there was some meeting of the minds, what is the resolution in terms of the term? I mean, that seemed to be open the last time we discussed it.
It was the term that the board had approved. It was a combination of 30 years and or in conjunction with the term of any financing.
And we think Pawtucket is going along with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Their attorney and their staff is just as going before their board. With respect to the demo of the treatment plant, the analysis was presented to the Properties Committee earlier this month, and that presentation is provided to the full board tonight.
Have we heard any more from these prospective people that want to use it?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
is that coming in the report tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
The dam project's been kind of quiet. They're pretty much done at this point. They've been just doing some site restoration and stabilization in advance of the winter months. We do have an application into DEM to remove additional earthen berm that's west of the breach for the purpose of restoring forested wetland, and that's because we do have grant funds still available. So we're actually looking to expand the work while we have the contractor on site. The lead service line replacement program, I've updated the chart that I presented to the board last month. And I guess in summary, over this past month, 7 public side services were replaced under the contract, and 3 private sides were replaced in accordance with the folks using the data plan that the board had approved. And we did submit our inventory as required before the deadline of October 14th, and the inventory has already been received and approved by DOH. And I'd say Mike and the staff did a bang-up job pulling all that information together. It's quite a bit of an effort considering the number of services and kind of diving into all our past records, trying to determine not only on the public side, but the private side, which we didn't have a whole lot of information on and a lot of customer interaction. So that's it'll be an ongoing, data chain, and as you accept more information, as people fill out the forms or do the surveys, that inventory will always be modified. However, we do have that by that October 14th, this is what we have as of that date. and the state has that information.
That's pretty impressive that the health department approved the report that quickly.
Yeah.
You think they looked
I don't
at
think
it?
I've ever remembered them doing anything that quickly.
You know, they are working with a third party that's helping them managing all this data as well. I guess this is a little superfluous for the BCWA properties. We had the properties committee meeting as previously noted. With respect to public information, press release was issued and then printed by the local news media regarding the lead service line inventory survey. And I provided a copy of the digital post that was on the display on our website. The release was also in the printed editions as well. With respect to board member education, I have no new items to report for this month. With respect to water purchases for the month of September, a little higher than compared 5% from this time last year, but we're still running about 5% below the 5-year average. The graphs are attached. We've completed our hydrant flushing for the fall. Budget time. It's been budget time. We've been meeting with departments, and we're pretty much close to finalizing a draft of the operating budget and the capital improvement plan. We plan on scheduling meetings with the finance committee next month to present the budget. The capital improvement project summary table, you can see, and this is an item on the agenda, 2023 water main renewal project, they came in over budget. Whether that is offset by other projects, and that will be discussed at that agenda item. That concludes my report.
Now that this is no longer a reservoir,
Yes.
do we have any control or responsibility for what goes on in there?
On the water itself,
Yes. I wouldn't think so.
I don't think so.
I didn't think so.
We still have control over the land that accesses it. That's what we have.
Do we own the land around the reservoir?
Not
Not all of it.
But we do own some.
I know somebody told me they had seen kayakers in there.
Oh, yeah, people have
I
kayaks.
think okay, but if something happens to them, can they come back at the water authority? That's what I'm wondering.
No.
I didn't think they would.
They always look for the deepest pockets.
Well, they have to.
Yeah. It's good question.
We'll have our attorney check in.
It is an interesting question.
Oh.
It's just right now, it's just a public water. It's just a
That's what
water
I thought.
project.
It's a public waterway.
Mike,
Excuse me. Again, not too much else to add, but Barrington remains active. I don't know if anyone was impacted, but we were still running that higher pressure, but we had quite the event the other night where a hydrant, we lost the entire lateral. It was like a 6-inch hole, which was blowing water out based on a vehicle striking the hydrant. So did a little bit of damage, but we saved the hydrant. And that just got reinstalled. So, but it was a lot of water
Where was that one at?
on Washington. Somebody fell asleep and took it out at 6 o'clock in the evening. So it was in that late.
I didn't think our hydrants did that. I thought that was only Hollywood.
Oh no, they're supposed to break, but this one broke out at the main and took the whole lateral right off.
whereabouts on Washington?
I don't know the exact.
North or south of Lincoln?
North or south? South.
South, yeah.
Yeah.
It's no longer there, Monica.
Yeah. It's one of those breaks where you don't have to dig the hole. You just have to pump it out and just go down and fix it.
Pump it out.
That's it. Otherwise, Middle Highway, all of our assets that were impacted from the towns, also were buried by the town sewer contractor. Those are back in service. Everything's restored over there. and the contractors doing their sewer responsibilities and the roadway resurfaced accordingly. Our failure on Gooding and its impact to the expansion of the high service. We did some corrosion-based monitoring that involved soil samples and electrical continuity testing, where we could see if we were under the influence of other cathodic protection systems and or corrosive soils. We got a preliminary report back that pointed to soils, pointed to pretty severe. I mean, obviously, if you recall what the pictures of the pipe looked like, for metal to deteriorate that quickly, where it's supposed to have almost 100 years and it only lasted 40. Very, very aggressive soils. I guess you could say contaminated at that point with chlorides.
Mike, is that degree of corrosiveness, is that a naturally occurring phenomenon, or is there some contamination in the past, or might there be?
It could be very likely associated with stormwater runoff from roadway de-icing chemicals. Because just from the sampling that we performed, we did see varying degrees. So for some reason, at the point of failure, whether or not that's the most corrosive point, we didn't inspect the entire line. But from the sampling we did, that had the highest concentration of chlorides. So it does seem to align with the corrosive nature of that.
And you mentioned the entire line. Is there a further expanse we should be looking at in terms of where the corrosion, goes higher?
So that's the next steps. We seem to have a far limit in the easterly direction where we profiled the soil. So right now we applied for road opening permits so we could dig more holes to the west and to the south down to Naomi, so we can explore the exact extents of the bad soils, and then we can plan the work to replace the pipe accordingly. That's pretty much it. Steve touched on the service line, Oak Street, we're plugging away. We still have a presence there, just doing punch list stuff, but we're operational. So if anyone has any questions.
Last year we got a report on all the hydrants and the status and the values, flow, and are you doing that again this year? From the hydrant testing?
So we capture data. It is rudimentary data. It's flow and pressure is based off a diffusing device, but that's captured every time we test the hydrant. So it wouldn't be as accurate as the information Steve compiled from the hydraulic model, but it is estimated flows, pressures, and durations. And we use that also to track our unaccounted water that we report on every year. So that lives in our work management system, so the data's in there.
A question, Steve, about with a pipeline project. We know more or less where the pipeline's going to go, and it's mentioned in Mike's report about engaging private property owners with updated plans to formalize easement and access agreements. Okay. At some point, we need to retain an appraiser to make offers for those easements and so forth. What is our process for that?
The process is, we have the plans, we'll present the access documents, the leasing documents to the each private property owner. If upon review, they have, their legal team look at it or whatever, and if they're looking for payment, at that point we would engage a appraiser. But we wouldn't do it in advance.
Do you expect any land taking?
Well, we hope not. We've spoke with each of these property owners already, and they're amenable to the project. So, which is why we've put the pipeline where it is.
Yeah.
So, but now it's just at a point where.
There is a stretch where we're going through commercial industrial property.
Yeah, it's a piece as we go under 195, and we come up in a parking lot of an industrial or commercial piece of property right off of Waterman Avenue in East Providence. So the pipe would come up at that location, and then it does run adjacent to another piece of property before crossing Waterman Avenue to another piece of private property, and before heading in a westerly direction towards Pawtucket Avenue. The challenge being that length of Waterman Avenue that we need to bypass was chock full of utilities. There was just no place to put a 30-inch pipe. So we had to put it off the right of way. Like I said, we met with each of these individual property owners. So far, they've been amenable. Now it's just that we're at a point where to provide them with the actual documents for them for their review.
Because easements usually mean restrictions of use of the property for certain things, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in each instance though, the final permanent easement, the pipeline is situated along the property line edge, so as not to provide long-term impacts to the property.
Okay. Thank you. Colin.
Right.
Colin.
I'll respond to both. So I just did a quick update on the 2024 distribution system improvement contract. Just gave an update on UConn, how they're doing with the cleaning and lining and the lead services. So when I wrote the report, UConn was finishing up the work on State Street in Bristol. They're doing some service renewals, paving crossings, and replacing meters, just kind of like buttoning up all of that. Maple Street in Warren was clean and lined on the week of the 7th, and we reviewed the video of it. You can see a screenshot of it on the bottom, and we approved it. And with the cleaning and lining on Maple Street, all the cleaning and lining of the scope of the project has been completed. So now they're just focusing on service renewals. There's a 2-inch relay in Warren and replacing things like gate valves and hydrants and whatnot. So at the bottom, I just have like a before and after of the cast iron main on Maple Street.
Have you, the State Street thing, have you resolved whether or not it's going to be paved curb to curb in the end?
We still need to meet with the town of Bristol to figure out what limits that we're going to be milling over there.
So the DPW director?
I think it was,
Yeah, that's who we'll coordinate with.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Dan, you're on.
Wait, the IT book? What's the IT?
He's not here.
I don't care. The question I have for IT is that, you know, we did another upgrade and doing firewalls and this, that. Is that done by do we have a contract with somebody who maintains all of the firewalls and everything else, or are we?
So we do that here.
So this just all of a sudden comes up when you get a new load of something and go out and do it, and that was all budgeted for?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? For management team? But Dan, you're on.
All right. Not that I ever really speak about the balance sheet too much in the meeting, but you can see the bill to East Providence is on the balance sheet, that $302,000. The majority of that is the bill to East Providence. There's some small little things in there, usually like 65 billings and stuff like that, but that's where that's sitting. Okay, so if we look at September versus September, not a lot of activity really. Income's up a little bit over the prior year. That's the rating piece, and As you can see, the water purchases were a little bit higher, and that's pretty much in line with what Steve reported. I got 4.95%, it's in the ballpark. So purchased a little more water in September, we must use just a little bit more water than we did last September. We'll see that in the consumption report. Nothing else really sticks out there. Operations, looks like it's 18,000 higher. I went back and looked, and last September we had a couple of guys out. We had like one open position and one gentleman out on some sort of leave or whatever. So that's why that looks a little higher than it did last September. If you go through September, for the 7 months, revenue's up just over 3.5%. That's just largely the rate increase, a little bit higher than the decreased consumption for the year. When we look at the expenses are almost pretty much spot on. Last year, they're just 1.19% higher. A lot of the same things that have been in there all year causing that. Again, the pension contribution is a little bit different this year than it was last year, as Evan kind of report from Jen. Operations and maintenance is a little bit higher. We had some additional paving costs this year that we didn't have in the prior year. And again, overall, the water purchases are down through September, as Steve has reported. So
My irrigation system's offline now, so it's gonna go down.
I just saw somebody down the road when I went for a walk, spraying water in their sprinkler, so I'm like, get the help out. The next page has actual versus budget. We're over budget for revenue, which is always a good thing, just over 12%. As again, that's pretty much we budget a little conservative on that end, so I would expect it to be over budget. Expenses are under budget 11%. That's a little bit better, I think, than last month. Same big things in there. The admin expense is a little bit lower, largely due to that OPEB contribution, which I make at the end of the year versus during the year. The water purchases are lower than budget. The consumption is lower than even what we budgeted. And professional fees are under budget. We just had less legal and consulting expenses than we originally budgeted, which is a good thing, I guess.
How do we budget the purchase of water from Providence? Like, why are we so much lower than what we thought we would be at this point?
Well, if you look, again, it's kind of conservative. So you budget a little bit higher, you budget conservative on the expenses, which means you budget a little higher on the expenses. So there's a little higher on the expenses in general to budget conservative. And then like Steve said, the consumptions was up a little bit, so it's down. The consumption's down for the whole year, so we just kind of budgeted.
So do we budget like 5% higher than we were expecting for that cushion, and then is it coming down like 6%?
I have to go back. I just did this, and it was probably a little more. It was probably more than 5% compared to what it's looking like this year. And again, this year is down from last year, so it was probably in that 5 to 10% range estimate. Maybe it was a little bit higher, but now it's kind of come down a little bit because we do get some of the water. I think it's like 30% or so from East Providence, which charges us a little bit higher.
Yep.
And we budgeted in a rate increase from Providence Water the last couple of years. And they haven't. So that's kind of added to that buffer in there. So that's probably why it's a little bit higher. It's a combination of we've budgeted in a couple rate increases the last couple of years. It didn't for this coming year. And then consumption actually being lower than even what we kind of had thought. I mean, a 5% down for the year is that's a lot more than I think we would normally think in terms of just knowing that trend of conservation going down. So I really think that's just the bulk of it. Unfortunately, it's not that purchases and the sales are not a great, there's no easy way to budget it because historical is not as reliable as in a lot of other situations because you can have a really dry summer, really wet summer, COVID, stuff like that,
So Dan's question, so I understand budgeting conservatively, though this is turning out to be very conservative, right? I mean,
That's what I'm getting at.
We've got we're almost $3 million ahead of budget, so I guess is there any lessons learned here as we start doing the budget for the next fiscal year that we would consider doing things a little bit differently in terms of how we project out the budget?
I think the last couple of years, we've kept expenses pretty flat. You'll see, I think last year they changed like less than 1%. This year it's less than 0.5%. So I think we've been kind of like tweaking it in that manner, because obviously things have gone up a lot in the last 2-3 years, especially since the pandemic with the inflation and stuff like that. So I think we've tempered it a little bit with that. The consumption part for the income side that's really incredibly difficult to even refine that a little bit. I mean, I've looked at historical stuff, I've gone back and I've put it on Excel and charted it out for the last 5-10 years or whatever. And that consumption thing that in this report, I have that data back 15 years or so that Joe's given me. And it is so volatile that it's hard to even judge other than the overall trend down. So, and we,
No, go ahead.
I say, we're always budgeting, the increases, and in this situation, the budgeted increase for the increase that we did this past year in the water rates is basically gonna save us in terms of the consumption, that they're probably gonna be pretty close to flat. Our revenue will probably be pretty close to flat versus the prior year. Thankfully, because of the rate increase being enough to absorb the consumption.
Yeah, I was going to ask along those lines of, it seems to me that in some of the past budgets, we were always thinking in terms of the future capital expenditures that would come into play and trying to minimize the rate impact at some future time, so that we would, if we do a 5% gradual or minimal rate increases, it's much better than going 2%, then 10 or 15. And I know I got myself into that situation when I was in Warwick, where they did not have a rate increase for 10 years. And then I was the one who had to come in and say we have to have a 25% increase.
And I think some of the cushion also in the budget is to help kind of cover that piece, because that's the second piece. This is like the O&M budget, but then this kind of flows into the debt service calculation, which you'll see. I mean, you saw it in the board and stuff that Steve had given you. So that kind of helps hedge that a little bit too. So we're conservative on both ends, higher on the expenses, lower on the revenue, and then that ends up flowing through to that calculation. So it kind of provides a little additional buffer to that calculation as well going forward. Because like, as Juan said, that goes out for 10 years.
And what I've heard at public hearings, whether it was related to water or just general municipal things, is there's, on the one hand, people say they always have a rate increase. And then on the other hand, they'll say, why didn't they raise the rate a little bit more previously so they wouldn't have this big jump now? So you never know what the better way is of doing it, but I think what we've done with the gradual rate increase is probably a better approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can dive into this, with the finance committee meeting. We'll have all the 10-year capital budget along with the O&M.
I'm just curious on the I understand the complexities of projecting out kind of consumption and revenue and whatever, but I'm just curious if you've got a sense for what some of the other water utilities around do. Are you kind of are you consistent with what they do? Does everybody have a different mousetrap? And just kind of thinking about that as you prepare the budget. So
I have no idea.
might be good.
Our rates used to be very high in comparison to other municipalities and agencies around the state, but now it seems like it's been reversed, that we have a much lower rate. Our per capita our household consumption is one of the lowest in the state, if not the lowest, which every time I've seen those numbers over the last 20 years, 15 years, I've always questioned it, but it's always a correct number. I'm just always amazed at that. But if you look at like the 10 years of, I think it's 10 years that you show in here of consumption data, it goes up and down, but I think over the 10 years, it's pretty consistent, maybe by 5%. And so that almost drives what you think the water purchases are going to be. you know in there it's not gonna be higher than the highest, and it's not gonna be lower than the lowest. And also, we don't have there's not a lot of huge growth in Bristol County, especially with regard to, large water users. You might have some expansion at the college, but it's not a huge jump or anything like that. There's no new company coming in here saying they're going to use 100,000 gallons of water a day. So we can't depend on that. So it's always population isn't growing all that much. So it's not it's pretty steady, I think. Maybe, again, little blips here and there. If I have my irrigation system on, why not?
Use some more water on it.
Yeah.
So that's the budget piece, so we finished that up. The next page obviously has the billing and consumption, and you can see the consumption for the year is down just over 4%, and the revenue's up about 1.5%. And this, I do have this data going back, I think, like another 10 years prior to this, like go back to 2006. So I expect that to be pretty much, we've gone through the maybe October, we have a little bit of picking up some of the summer consumption, but that's pretty much the end of it. The trust report, we are at 7.76. It's a little bump up from August. Then the last page is the pension report. And then this is through September, so you can see it, about $6,500. They probably charge us just over $2,000 or so a month, $2,200 a month, as the TPA that holds the assets. So that's really it. And like Steve said, we have been working on the budget. The O&M is pretty much done. At least to the point of ready to, present it or whatever. I'm just gonna start working on the debt piece, which really impacts more the rate increase piece later on. We're working on it at the same time. I just got some rates from our financial advisor that we use when we go out for bonds. I ask them every year to see what the current rates are, and I'll use those what we're projecting in debt. I'll use those rates to calculate the amortization schedules. So should have everything up and running, ready to go for the finance committee.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of Dan? No. Moving on, anybody have anything to report regarding the town council? Moving on, properties committee, discussion of presentation of condition of assessment of the old station structure at 450 Child Street. We did have a committee meeting, and Steve?
So the property committee meeting, did meet on October 2nd. We did have the consultant here, and his presentation is attached for the board, for their information. And I think if you look through here, go through it, they did provide some recommendations with respect to costs. And I guess option one was you do a comprehensive renovation of the building. Now this is just the smaller building that's just right on the sidewalk over here. If we were to look at to do a full reno of that property, of that building specifically, looking at a little over $800,000. If the authority wished to hold on to the building and maybe just button it up to prevent further deterioration, you're looking at a cost of $330,000. And then option three is which is folded into the demo of a larger plant building. We're looking at a cost of less than $75,000. The property committee there was no item for the property committee to make a recommendation at that meeting. It was a presentation and discussion only. And likewise, just have it here for discussion. I can tell you though, after the meeting, about a week later, I did get an email from a gentleman who made a presentation to the board. Ned Connors, if you recall, was a local consultant in historical preservation. He sent me an email saying he understands that the BCW Properties Committee recently met and reviewed the Park Corp study. He did review those documents because they were online as part of just the, as part of the agenda. We make those documents available, and he said he's sharing them with the Warren Preservation Society, the Warren Heritage Foundation, and the Bristol Historical and Preservation Society. He's meeting with these three groups to continue discussion of preserving and returning them to active use. With this in mind, I requested to meet with the Properties Committee to discuss further the findings of the park report and the support within the preservation and historical communities of the two towns for preservation of these important waterworks buildings.
Steve, have they seen that $806,000 number to put it in good shape?
Yes.
And then they're still pretending to be in the game?
Yes, but I mean, their interest is more in the plant building, which we haven't done any kind of analysis on that. But I think if you can kind of extrapolate, the smaller building, almost $1 million to try to renovate that to the larger building.
Yeah, but are they expecting us to fix it and then use it?
No.
Oh.
My recommendation is to reply to the gentleman if he wants to meet with the committee and do it, and have a firm value of when he can provide it. A dollar amount that he can provide that would assume the responsibility of the buildings, of that small building.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't come about, give him a 6-month window. What do you think? A 6-month window to say, I have the money that I'm gonna take it over. We proceed with demolition of both buildings.
But the interesting thing here is the small building isn't the one that's architecturally interesting or historically interesting. From what I heard Ned say last time, it was the other building. And from my own personal viewpoint, I look at that building and I say, the only thing that I see interesting there are the brackets, the roof brackets that are at the top. But if you walk into the building, it's beyond, in my opinion, it's beyond restoring to a usable situation. You have multiple levels and treatment facilities that were used, mechanical rooms that were used, laboratory rooms that were used, that are a mess, to say it nicely. And I can't imagine if this building's going to cost, almost $1 million to get up and usable again. I can't imagine what the bigger building would cost. And I'm on the Bristol Historic Preservation Society's Board of Directors, former president, and I'd love to see everything preserved, but there's practical sides of the whole thing, and these two don't seem to lend themselves very well. If somebody has the money and the usage, right,
invite him in and say, okay, your question.
I think it's something, as a public agency, we can give the public a chance to react to us, but we also have to go on with our life and operate our agency the way we see appropriately. I was saying to Steve earlier that we can go and take parts of that big building, like those, what are they called, the brackets, the roof brackets that are up there, remove them, preserve those, put up a big display or something using those. And you see that in a lot of different locations where something was here, here's what it looked like. You can do a photo, a lot of photographs of it and so forth and so forth. But the buildings have outlived functional use. I took a real estate class many years ago in the real estate. The teacher said, more buildings are torn down than fall down. And that's because they become functionally obsolete. And you take them down and you put something new in their place. You're fortunate when we find buildings like this that we're able to go and do something with. I was at a doctor's office in Providence today in an old mill building, and they did a phenomenal job of renovating that mill building. But this is not that kind of situation.
Not to cut you off, but I think from the meeting that we had on this properties committee thing, I wanted to get out of the buildings now. The small one, get out, move the guys into a safe facility over there in the lot, cut the power. If we're spending $30,000, I remember the number, $30,000 a month on power going into that other building, do the decommissioning of the building. We're spending.
It's a 2001.
2,000.
I think another major problem we have is the land that would be required to go with those buildings and not have it affect our operation. They're not gonna just take the building, the square footage of the
Right.
building. They're gonna need land around them.
Well, I guess the other thing too is, I mean, this is just kind of, I mean, for what Steve, you and your team should be doing, this is kind of noise, right? I mean, this is not, dealing with this is probably not your highest and best use. I mean, I know we want to probably be good community neighbors, but,
That's what it's all about.
but, you know, is it, to your point, Lon, is it really a shot that this is gonna be a viable building to preserve?
Independent site building? Yes.
Maybe they can move them.
But I think we do the good new neighbor thing, the responsible thing, and we have another meeting of the properties committee. We invite Ned and anybody else who wants to come in and talk to us about uses, and we say, okay, if you have something substantive, you need to get it to us within X days. Because we have an agency to run, and we have to make decisions. And if somebody comes back and says, we've secured $1 million and XYZ, whatever, well, that,
But they've known this for over 2 years.
yeah, yeah. And we would hope they'd be further along in the process now.
Can we just send them a letter and say we've made a decision to demolish both buildings at this time? Oh.
But we don't have it on the agenda for action tonight in any case, so.
Okay.
One wants to save the eaves, the cornices.
Okay.
Maybe we put them on this
We'll
building.
do that with the cherry picker tomorrow, but it's just, it has been around for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And nobody has ever come in other than say it would look nice.
That's more than 2 years ago we went to that meeting, right, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, at least.
I myself would have expected that if it was such a high priority to save, and that was of high community interest, that we would have heard from some people out there that says, I've got an idea for it, or I want to do this with it. And we haven't really seen that other than sort of an emotional response of, we have to do something with that building. That's, we can agree, but, and our answer is take them down.
Well, realistically, the more we wait,
Right.
it's detrimental to the Bristol County Water Authority. With those things gone, the plans can proceed, whether we need a new garage or whatever's necessary. But if we sit here and shuffle along, we're never gonna get to that point.
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting shuffling, I'm suggesting we
2
have.
years is enough.
What's that?
2 years is enough.
I know, but we're now at a decision point. The next decision point would be the next board meeting. Between now and that next board meeting, we can hold another committee meeting. And we can, if we want to, we can decide at that committee meeting that we would go forward with, you know, we'll put this block of time aside and say this is when it's gonna happen, one way or the other. It's quiet in here.
There's no action item, correct, so we simply.
It's not an action item.
It ends with.
Anybody have any other thoughts?
So we'll schedule a meeting.
We didn't tell the schedule, that's
Okay.
of the properties committee. I hate to tell you, I'm not gonna be around in December, but anyway.
Up to me.
Schedule it for December.
You can do whatever you want in December.
They'll be gone by January.
You got the votes, you can do what you want.
I have another granddaughter on her way, and so I'll be in California for much of December waiting.
You don't have to be there.
He's a doctor.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay,
Move it here.
you can call my daughter.
Move it here for a month.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Policy Committee, recommendations and modifications to the claims policy, and board vote on recommendation.
The policy committee met at 4:45 and considered and discussed the proposal set forth by Steve. After our consideration, we did vote, there was a motion to approve that, make that change. There was a further motion or suggestion by Bob that, now, was there a dollar limit attached to that, or that all claims, that we get a report on claims?
It's just, the form to submit a claim, I asked that it be put online in the website, and that it be allowed to be filled in as you bring it in.
But in
Right.
terms of a report by Steve to us when the claim is made, to keep us informed.
Oh, I didn't.
I thought you
were saying that.
were saying at this point.
We said that, you know, that because there's one a year, we should be notified when we get a claim
Right,
in.
right, okay, so that's part of our proposal.
So as part of Dan or Steve's monthly report, they'll report to us that a claim has been made, they can make a decision.
I just suggested this form rather than get put online, and it's, it can be filled out right online, and submitted.
Do you think $500 is enough?
So it's 2,500.
Yeah, 25.
Okay.
We went to 2,500.
Okay.
The
All right,
discussion.
okay, all right.
So we have a recommendation from the committee. Do I have a motion to,
So,
so
Second.
moved? Second. All those in favor of increasing that dollar figure and doing the other administrative activities associated with claims, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous.
There you go, Steve, you got a lot of leeway.
Moving on, the next one is item number 10, modification to project budget for the 2023 water main rehabilitation project.
Yes.
Steve.
So back in February 23, the board approved the project budget of $2.5 million for the 2023 water main rehab project. The contract was awarded to W. Walsh. They gave us competitive bid pricing, specifically with the water main rehab work. And so we actually did some additional change orders at our request to do some additional work above and beyond the contract. However, following the completion of the work, including all the final paving, when we received the final invoice, it came in higher than the approved budget by amount of $94,130.83. Colin dove into the project kind of like after the fact, somewhat remeasured all the quantities, went out and remeasured the actual work that was completed. And this kind of also is also checked by our the engineer that we hired from CAR that also oversees the work. And it was discovered that the overage was due to an underestimation, I guess on our part, of the actual work that was going to be done with respect to final paving and the final paving costs. So that resulted in the overage. And I guess it's more or less procedural because the work has been done. We do need to pay Walsh for the work that was performed. But I'm asking that the budget be approved or be increased from the $2.5 million to $2,594,132. I will note that, I mean, this is one project of several that was funded under the capital improvement bond. And while this project came in slightly above budget, we did have the prior 2022 capital improvement bond project come in under $200,000, so kind of balance each other off.
Make a motion to be accepted.
Second. Okay, any discussion? The 2022 bond, is money still in that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
We're still paying the Hope Street Pump Station as well as Phase 2 design costs.
Okay, well, is
In the
the
20
bond issue fully committed?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
committed.
Oh, it's
Not
committed.
spent off.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll probably be completely used up by next year.
And you said that the other projects that are being funded in the, by that bond issue came in at $200,000 less. So by approving this, we're not overspending. It wasn't foreseen as a project in this category, but we're not overspending the bond monies.
No.
Okay. All right, and I actually argue that you're not over budget because you came up with the new project. But anyway, any other comments, questions, observations? All those in favor of the motion to approve?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, unanimous. Okay, the next item is to go into executive session. No reason to go into executive session. A question though, are you still on next week? Is that Monday?
Tuesday,
Tuesday, and that starts at what time?
9:30.
9:30? Great. Next scheduled meeting. Steve, do you have a memo on?
Yes, this is for approval. This is the October meeting request. As you start approaching the holidays, Halloween coming up, and then Election Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays, New Year's, whatever, things start kind of bunching up. The pre-scheduled board meeting is Wednesday, November 13th, which isn't too far from today. And that's followed by a full board meeting on Wednesday, December 11th. So as we have done in the past couple of years, I am requesting that, or recommending that the November 13th meeting be reserved for a finance committee meeting only to review the budget. And then the next full board meeting will be on December 11th. Typically, the budget is reviewed and recommended to the board at the December meeting. The December meeting is when the budget is approved in advance of a public hearing, which will be scheduled for January 23rd, 2025. So in summary, I'm requesting that the next meeting be Wednesday, November 13th for a finance committee meeting.
That's finance committee.
Correct.
And then the board meeting would be December 11th?
Yes.
So moved.
Just one question on prospective. So since I've been on board the last several months, we've had Thursday meetings. These are both Wednesday meetings. Going forward, do we have a particular night that we're gonna be looking at, just personal planning purposes?
Yeah,
We put out a schedule at the end of the year for the following year, as required by the Secretary of State's office.
Okay.
we put it together at the beginning of the year. When we came on board, we also didn't understand why the November and December meetings went from Thursday to Wednesday.
The way it always was.
I don't know.
You don't have, you could put them on Thursday.
Right.
No,
Put them on any day you want.
So typically Thursday's the day.
Typically Thursday is the day.
This is an aberration.
So
Okay.
So, I mean, if it could be, we could do Thursday, November 14th. I mean, it's really,
12. November, the November meeting?
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
All right, so December 11th is the next board meeting.
December 11th. For your purposes, December 11th, yes.
See you then.
You get November off.
Yeah.
So you want to change
Yeah, I'm supposed to do.
Thursdays? Is that what was just?
No.
Keep
No,
it
they
the
got-
way you've got it.
Keep it the way we got it. I mean, maybe when we do that, we put our meeting dates together next year, we'll do.
A question on the approval of the budget. Do we approve the budget and then take it to public hearing, or do we just approve it for public hearing?
The
Then
budget,
approve it after the public
the
hearing?
budget approved in December is the O&M budget. The rate increase is approved, is in a public meeting in January. Regardless, the rate, I mean, the rate increase is kind of in the budget,
Yeah.
but it really doesn't matter, because I mean, if you go 0 or 10, it's, the budget's made to meet our covenant requirements anyways. That kind of confused me when I first started, like, well, I'm talking about the revenue and the rate anyways, but the O&M budget, so basically just the expense piece is what's approved in December, and then the rate increase itself is approved in January 23rd at the public hearing.
You're not gonna be here anyway.
I'm not gonna be here anyway. Thank you, John.
Yes, there's a motion.
That we were gonna
Steve's
approve the changes.
report.
Make a motion, we approve the changes as proposed by the executive director for the meetings in November and December.
Thank you, John. And I have a second on that, and all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Any opposed?
Second.
And we're out of here. Thank you.
Thank you.